Commissioner Meyer,
Present.
Commissioner Benson, Commissioner Freitas,
Present.
Commissioner Kraft,
Present.
and Commissioner Lazard.
Present.
Thank you.
We'll do a salute to the flag. Approval of the May 8th minutes. Everyone had a chance to review.
I was able to read them, and I move approval.
Thank you. We have a first and a second. How about just a verbal vote? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Nay? None. All right, we'll move on to oral communications. If you have something you'd like to discuss that's not on the agenda tonight, now would be the time to bring that up. All right, we'll close that and move on to public hearing E1, the Morton and Cattleman vacation rental. And oh, yes, I'm sorry. Thank you for the reminder. There's been a suggestion to move the director's report, vacation rental compliance drive update, before we start this. So I don't think we have to make a motion to vote on that.
No, it's at your discretion.
Great. So hopefully it looks like he's here to make his presentation.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Finance Director Millar is here to give us a presentation. Let me... slideshow right there and save from beginning.
All right, good evening. My name is Lane Millar. I'm the finance director for the city of Eureka. And back in March, I did a presentation to the city council on vacation rental management. This data is a little bit stale, so this really represented more activity from the wintertime, so just be aware that you're not looking at the most up-to-date information. So in this report or presentation, we'll talk about host compliance, enforcement activities, VDU statistics, revenues, and a housing trust fund. So host compliance, back in 2019, I was at the League of California Cities, and I went to this seminar, and they talked about vacation rental management. And there was the CEO of this company called Host Compliance. He presented this product that essentially goes through all the booking sites. And I think today we're looking at hundreds, if not thousands, of booking sites. And they do a number of different services for us. So the main service is address identification. So they provide us with this web tool, and there's a dashboard when you log in, and it essentially shows you where all the vacation rentals are in the city. And it's looking at the main sites, obviously, but there's a lot more. Even today, I mean, back then there was only a handful, but now they tend to keep producing more and more, so that's making it harder for staff or anyone involved in this to do this on their own, essentially. They also do compliance monitoring. The city provides them with a list of permitted rentals, and they cross-reference that information with their data so they can tell us who is permitted and who is not. they also do rental activity monitoring. So they will look at each listing, and by using the calendars on the booking site, they can actually tell us how often these sites are being rented. They also provide us with a tax collection tool. This tool allows a user to submit a TOT, or a transient occupancy tax form, and then pay their taxes. We're limiting this piece of the software just for VDUs at the moment, but someday we'd like to use this tool for hotels and motels. Their host compliance is not perfect. It gives the city a lot of data, but that data isn't very clean. There's a lot of duplicate entries. So if you put your address in one site and then add another listing to another site like VRBO, and you don't spell out street, it might pick up your rental as two different properties. So I have to actually go in and try to identify duplicates. So that takes a lot of time. It captures commercial activities. A lot of hotels will utilize Airbnb. And then not all addresses can be identified by the software. Typically, we know the address. The problem is that when we go to enforce, we like to keep all of the activities or enforcement activities within host compliance. And if they don't have an address, then they can't send a letter out. So the next section is enforcement actions. So very recently, we set up these additional services with host compliance to essentially send out letters to addresses to let them know that they're not in compliance, as well as notify them about what we think they owe in taxes. So because we have that rental activity data, we can essentially assume what they owe in back taxes, because all of these listings, they will post a price. So we take that price and how many days are blocked out on the calendar, and we come up with what we think they owe the city in terms of tax revenue. What's nice is that the city doesn't have to prove their number. The applicants have to prove that we're wrong. So we kind of have an upper hand in this. So recently we've sent out about 15 letters to operators. We're going to do this in batches because it is a kind of a big deal to regulate. It requires multiple departments to work together on this project. Obviously, finance is interested in the tax collection. That's kind of the easy part. The hard part is permitting some of these sites. Some of them won't be able to be permitted. So they're going to have to go through development services, building, and we might even have to have code enforcement work with us to help track down some of these operators. So that's been the biggest hindrance to starting this process because it requires so much time from multiple departments. Oops. So we've sent out these letters through host compliance. It keeps track of who has received a letter. So the letter stipulates that they have 30 days to contact staff and then 30 days to pay back taxes. Because some of these back taxes or the amounts owed are so large, if they set up a payment plan, we'll consider that payment, but they have to maintain that payment plan to start the permitting process. So once they set up that plan or pay their taxes, they have 6 months to complete the permitting process through development services and building. If they fail to communicate, we'll send them a second letter, and they'll have another 30 days to contact and pay. And then if they fail to respond to the second letter, we have an option to record a tax lien on the property. We haven't gotten to that step yet, but we won't hesitate to do this in some cases. So statistics. So because the site is tracking all of this activity, I went through And I kind of came up with some graphs to kind of show you the extent of the problem. So right now, or not right now, back in March, it appeared that there were about 102 operators, and 50% of those operators were doing it illegally. They were utilizing all housing types, whether that's a single-family home, apartment or condo, or an ADU, which is also a guest house or a granny flat. We even saw boats and tents and RVs as options. When you compare the housing type as a percent of total housing, and these are numbers I took off the city's housing element. You can see in most categories, the total, even with the illegal operators, they represent a small percentage of our housing stock. So less than 1% overall. And then this category shows that there's a lot of them are using ADUs, which I think would fall under an other category, but I believe the city has more than 190 ADUs right now, so I do have questions about that piece of the chart. But overall, right now, it's less than 1%, even when you consider the illegal operators. So what I also noticed was that there's a lot of people that have essentially dipped their toes into the marketplace, but a lot of these people have operated for a short period of time, but do not remain operating. As you can see, the last 30 days, we only saw 57 operators. And then if you look back at the last 60 days, back in March, there were 87. And then the last year, there were about 99 different operators in the city of Eureka. So revenue. Of the existing operators in 2022, they collected about 1.1 million in rents, and the city received about 114,000 in TOT. That represented about 3.4% of the city's TOT revenue in calendar year 2022. So I see more potential in revenues here. If we assume that those illegal operators receive permits, I think on the low end, we should assume about 142,000 per year. And then on the high end, over 229,000. So I think revenue is an opportunity for the city. We have what is called a housing trust fund opportunity. So a local housing trust fund program is something you set up with the state of California. You can use funds in the trust fund for construction loans, financing loans, or deferred payment financing, pre-development costs, and acquisition, as well as rehab. So the requirements are that you have a dedicated source of funding. So the council is open to utilizing the VDU TOT revenue for the trust fund. You have to have an average contribution of $100,000 per year. We're already doing that. And then you have to seed the fund with $500,000. Just recently, we amended our budget for the American Rescue Plan monies, and we decided to reallocate $500,000 to a city trust fund. So now we have all the components to set up a trust fund. So that is likely a next step. The trust fund must be used for certain income levels. So 30% of the dollars spent have to be dedicated to extremely low income households, and then 50% dedicated to lower income households, and then the remaining 20% is dedicated to moderate income households. And that is all I have.
Thank you, Lane. Are you open to questions from? Great. You have questions, anybody?
So this is maybe a question, for multiple staff, but if this was a presentation given to the council, were there questions? I mean, did they have questions, and did any of those questions revolve around setting a cap at that time based on the number that was discussed?
There's interest in a cap, not from everyone, but what I remember is us coming back to them after the summer time, because what we expect is as we enforce or send out more and more letters, you're going to see the total number drop. And in fact, in a lot of cases, some of the people operating today won't be able to operate in the future because they're using an illegal unit or something similar. So a cap is certainly on the table, but I think we're trying to figure out what our number will be in the long run.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Just one other question. What was the highest tab someone had racked up with their VDU so far?
I'm not sure, but I can report back.
Okay. Was it thousands? I'm just curious, ballpark.
The first two that went out had back taxes of over $7,000.
Great.
So
Thank you.
yeah, it's a lot of money.
Director Millar, so I personally am not concerned about the overall statistic citywide, but two things. I mean, one, this is probably the pain point that comes up most for this commission is, neighbors concerned. And I think in certain neighborhoods, there are enough to be concerned about. I mean, one of them that we're considering tonight, a person last time, it was continued from last month, said that, I walk out my house and I can see 3, and I've been in that neighborhood. It's a small neighborhood. And so if I lived there, that would concern me. Are there thoughts with respect to a cap of delegating that to neighborhoods or some other way so that the 1%, which is pretty benign, doesn't fall on just a handful of neighborhoods?
Lane, sorry, let me get in here. I actually have a map of all the permitted ones. And the map also on host compliance is somewhat similar to this. Neither of them are showing a super high concentration in one part of the city at this point, like you would in a coastal town where everybody's vacation rentals right on the beach. Whoa. So I don't know if there is a particular area that's highly impacted compared to others.
So it looks like there's some clustering. It's a little hard to get scale. I'm not the best spatial person in the world, so let's say that run along Eureka High School there. How far apart are those?
Oh, yeah. That looks like maybe it's over 6 blocks.
Okay.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah. Yep, that's a microcluster for sure.
Go ahead. Sorry.
And so just one assumption that I want to gut check with you. The city wants people who are running vacation rentals currently that are not permitted to come into compliance, right? I mean, if we're here considering that, are we trying to encourage people to get through this process?
I don't think we're trying to encourage people to do it as much as not do it illegally. So, I mean, maybe you could...
Yeah, I think the fact that there's a permitting pathway is going to make I'm thinking it's going to make them more motivated to respond to us and come into compliance because there is a path forward. But when I've been going through the list of illegal ones that aren't paying TOT, a lot of them I can't track. They're second units on, they're ADUs, and if they weren't legally permitted before 2020, or they can't be vacation rentals. So this compliance drive is actually going to bring a bunch of long-term rentals onto the market, I think, because there'll be people that will have to stop short-term renting these second units, and then hopefully we'll want to long-term rent them. Also, there's all these units being created through this that it's hard to tell where you go from just renting a room in your house to creating a junior accessory dwelling unit, because they create you enter this from an outside door, and we've added a kitchenette, and you have your own bathroom and bedroom. And it's at what point does it become a junior ADU that we can't allow them to use as a vacation rental? That's something we're grappling with.
Okay. Very good call-outs. Thank you.
And I would just add that, so the different departments are going to have different agendas. And I think for finance is a message that tells the operators that we see what you're doing and we can calculate what you owe us. And we're trying to make it a fair playing field, because these are taking from hotels and, people that are permitted and doing things right. So I don't think it's encouraging, especially after talking to a couple of these people. I think, in fact, once you explain the process to come into compliance, that in itself is something that they might not consider doing after learning what it takes, because it's not easy. I mean, it's a pretty long process, to be honest.
I have one more sort of procedural question. I'm definitely, on the same page as Commissioner Kraft about exploring ways to, set citywide caps or set sort of densities of permits per neighborhood. And I'd be really curious to hear what the rest of the commission is thinking on that. But I'm curious also to know if procedurally this is a good time on the agenda to dive down that rabbit hole. I understand this is just a report. So can you provide guidance on when to bring those things up?
This was agendized as a report on our compliance drive. So if we want to have a discussion about a cap and changing our regs, I would suggest putting that on our next agenda.
Would that be something I could request as an individual commissioner, or do we need the chair's? Yeah, well, yeah, if I need to make a motion, I'd like to make a motion now to request that we get that as an item with some potential ideas, or just letting us give some feedback on what we'd like to recommend to the council.
Okay, I don't need a motion. I think I can just add it to the agenda for next time.
Cool. Yeah, because this has come up, this is obviously a concern for this neighborhood, and we've heard this several times in several other parts of town, and I think we're pretty ready to dig into it and see if there's anything we want to recommend.
We just felt that the backstory about getting how far we are from, we're just starting our compliance drive, and without first having a handle on that, there's really no point to capping if we're not enforcing it to begin with.
Yeah, I think still having the conversation would be a good place to start, so we can show the neighbors that we're hearing them and we want to make progress on it.
I have one question for Finance Director Millar that's germane to your report out. I'll save all my other comments on this for later. You made you talked about how there being 12,286 housing units, and the VOUs were 102, and so it was 0.83%, so less than 1% of the overall housing in the city of Eureka are short-term vacation rentals. However, the number I'm really interested in, and I don't know if you have this number or have worked on this number, is that 12,286 are all the houses in Eureka, whether owned, single family owned, or for short-term rentals. It's just all the houses in Eureka. So it's a really general number that covers everything. So the percent of those that are vacation rentals is going to seem is really tiny, and I get that. However, the number I'm really interested in is how many of that total 12,286 are rentals in general, and how many of those are long-term rentals, and how many of those are short-term rentals. Is there any way for us to get those numbers? Because I'm thinking from the research that I've done on any rentals available on a given day. I'm getting long-term rentals in Eureka from rental.com. That is 11 houses available. Realtors.com, 8 houses for rent. Rentals.com, 35 houses for rent. And these aren't short-term, these are long-term rentals. So I'm trying to get a number of how many long-term rentals are out there compared to short-term vacation rentals. And what it appears to me is conservatively, there's twice or 3 times more vacation rentals available than actual rentals for people who want to live and work here. On a liberal, if we go up, if we're not looking at that 59 houses, we're looking at the 162 number. It's 10 times more vacation rentals available in any given day, week, or month. And I know that's a very moving target, that kind of a number, but is there a way other than me going on the web and doing what I did to get some idea of what that number is, or those numbers are?
I mean, when it comes to number of renters in the city limits, I believe they try to answer that question via the census.
Mm-hmm.
It's 47.4% of our housing units are owner occupied.
Thank you.
So it's about 50% rental, 50% owner occupied.
And of course, I don't think they're calling everybody, so that's an estimate. I honestly think our total housing units, that number might be a little, I don't know how accurate that is either. So we are dealing with a lot of data that is either hard to capture or might be a little bit incorrect. But in terms of comparing like available long-term rentals to vacation rentals, I don't know if that's a fair comparison because, most of the time, long-term rentals are a month minimum, if not 6 to 12 months. Mm-hmm. So that turnover is going to be much less than what you see on a vacation rental site.
Understood.
So that's
it's apples and oranges.
Yeah,
I get that. I'm just trying to get some sensibility about are we offering short-term vacation rentals at such an egregious number compared to long-term housing opportunities in Eureka that were really out of balance. I'm just trying to understand that better and try to answer that question.
And then one of the operators I spoke to that received a letter, she was using vacation rentals or Airbnb to fill in the gaps between her furnished long-term rentals. So I think she was trying to take advantage of like healthcare workers. So I think what I noticed, there's a lot of like toggling back and forth, whether, maybe you're gone for the summertime and that's an opportunity to rent out your house. I know people that rent their house out just for graduation weekend. So even within it's once you start digging in, you notice that, there are these other factors that actually make it really hard to understand the significance of the problem. What we're trying, or I guess this isn't to your question, but the purpose of the Housing Trust Fund is to try to take some of the revenue from these operators, because we know that's hurting the total housing units, to take that revenue and then to use it to essentially produce more affordable housing. So I think there is a balance. We definitely don't want this to get out of control and have thousands operating in the city, but I think there's a good balance, because without that revenue option, we would not be able to set up a housing trust fund. And housing trust funds are nice because you're essentially doubling your money. So every dollar we put into the trust fund or local dollar, the state will double it. So I think by the end of the calendar year, we're likely to see roughly 1.5 million available in this trust fund that can go towards the creation of new housing, or it can be used to subsidize housing.
Do you think it's a fair assumption if, if short-term housing, vacation rentals, do they make more money for landlords in general than long-term housing? I'm assuming that there's a little bit more money available, at least at certain times of year, than if you were renting it, that way. So I'm just curious whether that's a fair assumption.
If you're successful at renting it, you will make more money. But there is a saturation point in the market, and there's competition. So.
Right. And then on the other side of that, if more housing is going towards short-term rentals, does that actually drive up the cost of long-term housing because there's less places available for long-term housing?
I mean, I would imagine that would happen, but at a more global scale. So, the vacation rentals in Eureka aren't going to move the dial, but across the state or even the West Coast, you're going to see a lot of upward pressure on housing costs. I think we've seen that. So, honestly, I think the best strategy for getting out of this housing crunch is to throw as much money as you can towards development. And I think that's what we're trying to do with the Housing Trust Fund is we just want to build as much as possible. Right. And that's at least one of our strategies right now. Because we're one of our first programs we hope to release through the Housing Trust Fund is an ADU financing program. So essentially, you will come to the city, and the city will help match you with a contractor and a design professional, and then we will also fund the construction portion. And then at the end of the construction, or once it becomes a unit, then the owner can go out and look for permanent financing. And the good thing about ADUs is, unless I'm wrong, those can't be used for vacation rentals. So we're essentially taking the money from these, this thing that's hurting us more than helping us in terms of housing stock. And then we're trying to funnel it into an area where we know that that's going to be long-term housing.
Great. I really appreciate your comments and and some sharing of the strategy over time. Thank you.
So I had a question on just kind of piggybacking off of Craig's. It seems like it would be helpful to have a distinction made between, and I see how the census data could do this, but the 1% number you were throwing out as a percentage of the total housing stock, I think it's really more acutely in the long-term rental housing stock. So if that's, 50% rentals, is that what you were saying? So that would be, more like, 1.7%, 100 out of that or something. So, because I think that's the most available housing supply. So that in terms of how I would look at it, I would be more interested in seeing those relationships than the overall housing supply, because the owner occupied stuff is less known as far as its availability. One of the things that's on the agenda tonight is, a vacation rental when I visited the site this evening on the way to the meeting and on Ian Carson, and, there's a garage there that could easily be converted into an ADU under the current permissions. And I would think that would be a candidate for housing trust funds should those exist, right, under the concept you were just talking about. I guess one question I had on, I just wanted to verify, I think I know the answer, but I just want to make sure. The Housing Trust Fund's never had a prior incarnation. This will be the first time of it being established, or has it existed in the past?
It'll be the first time that the city would have their own Housing Trust Fund. Right. I think it's a new program overall, and I believe the county is starting a trust fund as well.
A regional one. So just walking through the because when you approach, so to date you've reached out to 50 people, is that right? Oh, less than that?
Less. We've just done the 15.
15, sorry. Okay. And that began when?
Just as of a couple weeks ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just trying to make sure. Okay. And so, when somebody finds out that they need a permit, then that starts the conversation about whether it can be permitted. I think Kristen was mentioning, some of these might be illegal ADUs. I guess one question I had about that was just, is there a provision or is there ways that people can permit things as sort of detached bedroom facilities that are not formal independent dwelling units that might be a little bit easier, or is that not make it any easier for folks when they're doing retroactive permitting?
Yeah, you can have a detached bedroom as an accessory use and it wouldn't qualify as an ADU because it doesn't have a bathroom and a kitchen.
Would it be eligible for vacation rental use, though?
Yes, it would be eligible for vacation rental use.
And then with, I guess, I wanted to know, you were saying that the taxation, the retroactive taxes that have to be collected, in order to enter the permitting process, someone would have to at least be on a payment plan or have paid it off. So they can't even initiate a permit until they've got one of those two things.
Correct. And if you fall behind, or if you get permitted and then don't pay your taxes, I have the ability to revoke the permit.
Right. Okay. I think that's it. There was one other thing but that's fine for now. Yeah, and I agree with Commissioner Freitas that we should have a policy discussion about it, even if it's premature in that we haven't really wrapped our head around the population of compliance versus non-compliance, because it is embedded in the code already, the cap concept, and starting to think about how to do that. Really, I don't think we need to know the numbers, more just what makes the rational sense from a kind of, so you're not just arbitrarily distributing it kind of in a regressive way, where it's more targeted, and I think there's ways to think about how to do that effectively, even if we're not going to pull the trigger. So, okay, that's good for now.
Thank you for your time and for the information and for getting the compliance drive started, because I know it's been talked about for a long time. So it sounds like you're headed in the right direction.
Yeah, no problem. And I plan to present to council in the fall. So after we finish the summertime season, which I think will tell us our mins and maxes in terms of like total operators. So would be more than happy to come back to the commission to give you an update, both on the activity as well as our how well we are enforcing this program. So thank you.
Thank you.
This is sorry, and I promise, but there is a distinction made in the code, and Kristen can kind of speak to this, between a vacation rental and one that are in a mixed use zoning situation. But for your numbers, is that, would they all be kind of lumped together? Does that make sense, that question?
I identified people or operators that were not in commercial zones, because that's technically or they wouldn't be eligible for a permit. Am I correct?
It's more principally permitted.
Yeah. The Google map that we were looking at with the 60 whatever that are actually permitted, those are all over the city. So they're called different things depending on where they are. They're called commercial lodging in a inland mixed use zone. They're called a vacation dwelling unit in the coastal zone. And they're called vacation rental in inland residential zones. And we have 2 legally permitted boats at Woodley Island where it's not called anything. It's called a boat.
Okay.
But it's not just that they got permits, it's that they keep an active business license. So if every year we have to check to see that they've renewed their business license. And if they don't, then their vacation rental permit is revoked. So we've permitted more than that over the years, but there's only 60 something that have kept up their business license and are continuing to do it.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we will return to public hearings, which is E1, Morton, and Cattleman Vacation Rental. procedurally, do I need to recuse myself and actually leave the room for this, or just abstain from voting?
Yes, if you have a conflict of interest, you announce what it is and then you leave the room.
Okay, so my conflict of interest is I live within 300 feet of this vacation rental.
And so then now the chair would be our Commissioner Benson for this item.
Okay, no worries, and thank you. And I also talked to, I recused myself of this last time, and I consulted with the city attorney today, and learned that I really don't have a conflict of interest on this issue. It's just because you know people who are involved, both neighbors, doesn't mean that you have a financial entanglement or that I stand to earn or lose money relative to this. So I do not have to recuse myself. So I will be listening and voting today, and so I can take on the co-chair for this item.
And before we get started, I just wanted to say, like, as an ex parte, I did talk with a neighbor earlier today who happens to also be a colleague of mine, but I also feel like it's not a significant enough conflict to require me to recuse.
This is Humboldt County. It's hard to have 6
I know.
degrees of separation. You're lucky to get 2. Okay, all right. Do we have a staff report then on this?
Yes, Assistant Planner Melissa Smith is going to present again.
Thank you. Melissa, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioners. This is the hearing on a minor use permit for a proposed vacation rental with no proprietor on site at 3539 J Street. Here's the project site in the context of city limits. Zooming in closer, you can see the site is located south of Harris Street and west of the Sequoia Park Zoo. Zooming in further, 3539 J Street includes 2 interior parcels totaling 19,166 square feet at the narrow dead end of a portion of J Street between Manzanita Avenue to the north and Madrone Avenue to the south, east of I Street, adjoining a Gulch Greenway of Martin Slough in the R1 residential low zone district. The 2 parcels contain an existing 2-story, 1,434 square foot, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, single-family residence with an attached 462 square foot 2-car garage. The applicant proposes to rent the entire property as one vacation rental. There will be no proprietor on site during rentals. Per the Eureka Municipal Code, a minor use permit is needed. There we go. A minor use permit is needed for a no proprietor on site vacation rental in the R1 zoning district. Eureka Municipal Code would allow for a total of 8 guests, not including children aged 12 and under, 2 persons per bedroom plus 2 additional persons. But per the applicant's request, and since the publishing of the staff report, the vacation rental will be limited to a 6-guest maximum. A designated emergency contact is located in Arcata less than the 50-mile requirement, and the emergency contact information will be provided to all properties within 200 feet of the rental, as well as the Eureka Police Department. At the time of the staff report was published, there were 3 on-site parking spaces, 2 in the garage, 1 in the driveway, but due to the reduction of guest maximum and by request from the applicant, the number of parking spaces provided will be 2, 1 in the garage and 1 in the driveway. Per the applicant, house rules include no parties or events and quiet hours between 10 p.m. and 8 a.m. every day. Upon receiving a request for public hearing, a public hearing was scheduled and conducted on May 8th of 2023. At the May 8th meeting, the item cannot be acted on because there was no quorum. As a result, the item was continued to a date certain today, June 12th, 2023. And an addendum memo was sent to all commissioners, which summarized the changes to the proposed resolution and conditions of approval, which had occurred since publishing the staff report, but before the May 8th meeting. Also included in the addendum memo were all the public comments from the neighbors and the applicant received in writing after publishing the staff report. As discussed in the staff report, staff believes the findings for approval can be made and recommends the Planning Commission hold a public hearing. and adopt a resolution finding the project is exempt from CEQA and conditionally approving the minor use permit for a vacation rental at 3539 J Street. Just to reiterate from a previous slide, the updated resolution, attachment 1, is the resolution staff is recommending adoption of. The suggested motion reads, I move the Planning Commission adopt a resolution finding the project is exempt from CEQA and conditionally approving a minor use permit for a vacation rental at 3539 J Street. I will stop sharing to allow for discussion. Staff is available for questions, and I am uncertain if the applicant is present.
Thank you, Assistant Planner Smith. Before we go to public comment, I'd like to just see if there are additional questions from the commission for you on this proposal.
I have a code question. I wanted to see if I'm reading this correctly. Under parking in the vacation rental section, it seems like it says no on-site parking is required to utilize an existing residential use as a vacation rental use. Is that my correct reading?
Correct. Our code does not require on-site parking.
So when you have it, that's just kind of gravy, but it's not required.
Correct. But in this case, staff is recommending that we do require on-site parking as a condition because of the lack of street parking. There is street parking, but it's not actually on the street because well, you explain it, Melissa.
Yeah, in this particular situation, J Street is a narrow street, narrower than most of our streets. And so there is some on-street parking, but a lot of the on-street parking on J Street is actually on someone's adjacent property. And so, like Director Kenyon stated, we are requiring as a condition that the 2 parking spaces mentioned in the presentation remain available for the duration of the operation of the vacation rental.
Right. Okay, thanks for clarifying.
Other questions from the commission? We were able to ask you lots of questions a month ago, so I think that's why there's not so many questions on this particular one. I'd then like to open it up to public comment. And what you can do is come up if you wish to speak. We'll hear people in the house first and then people online afterwards. And you're welcome to come up to the podium, tell us your name and where you're from, and then you'll have 3 minutes to make comment. Anybody in the house wish to comment on this? Okay, seeing none, I'll move to online. Is there anyone online who would like to make public comment?
Maxwell, I see your hand is raised if you want to unmute yourself.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for your attention to this issue, and I want to appreciate the time to be able to speak. I'll be straightforward and ask that you deny this request for this permit. I'm the neighbor who lives directly across from this rental, and it will be my front yard that will be most immediately impacted by it, and I want to ask you to please consider the neighborhood, as well as the current context in Eureka. First of all, I want to ask and remind, of course, as per the presentation we just saw, we desperately need housing in this community, and we don't need more short-term vacation rentals. This would be the 3rd short-term or weekend vacation rental within 600 feet of my house, and we don't need any more in the neighborhood. It's currently a vacation rental, but it asks for the minimum amount of time to be a month, which seems like the likelihood that someone would be invested in the community goes up if they're not just going to be here for 48 hours. Number 2, this is an amazing neighborhood with a cul-de-sac where kids ride bikes and play ball and have this kind of wonderful energy, and we need neighbors and we need people invested in this place. If we were to turn, and the question in front of y'all today is really, should you allow a short-term permit? It's already permitted as a rental. And so I would ask that you say no to this request. I think it's got disadvantages, and I want to name them in the context of the permit language. I think it's detrimental to the community. It undercuts neighborhoods, it puts children at risks, and it's fundamentally bad for the welfare of our neighborhood. At the heart of the difficulty in much of the conversation has been the suitability of this as a vacation rental. and it relies on parking in the front lawn of a neighbor's house in order to sort of count for the permit. It requires that the renters pass through both city and our neighbor's yard in order to get into the house. I want to just note that the permit proposers have said that they won't ask the renters to enter from the garage or from the back, but want them to enter crossing through our neighbor's yard. In the last month, right, the promise of the permit and much of the conversation last month was that folks would park in the garage or in the driveway. And in the last month, not a single car in that space has parked there. They've all parked in the front yard of one of our neighbors. Finally, I want to just remind y'all that our neighbor is prepared to run a hotel at this point. There are 2 signs prepared to be hung in the front of this yard, and one of them is 6 feet by 3 feet. I'm going to be living directly across, open up my morning blinds to see a Texaco sign in my front yard. This is not the neighborhood. This is not appropriate for the neighborhood in which we inhabit, and I don't think it's appropriate for Eureka zoning. There's no advantage to y'all approving this permit, and it would mean everything to the neighborhood if you would oppose it. Almost every single neighbor that lives here is here tonight or has expressed opposition. I love this city and I love this neighborhood. I want to ask y'all to please hold the line for this community, this place, and this time. Thank you very much for your consideration.
Kristen, will you run the clock just so we know, or can some? Yeah, thank you. There's someone else online with the hand up.
Mike, you can unmute yourself now if you'd like to speak. Mike McDowell.
I think I've unmuted there. Mike McDowell here. Are you guys able to hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
So I additionally spoke. I am a resident within I'm basically across the street, slightly catty corner of the proposed short-term rental. Not to address what I spoke on last month. I'm friends with the proponents. I've been involved with their application, spoken with them about the process. At the end now, I have issues now, and I'm not a fan of another short-term rental on my small street. To try to keep my answer short and sweet for time's sake, I feel that the city of Eureka doesn't really have a density code this is now the 3rd on my street of about 6 houses. You guys can see it on the map. The city of Eureka doesn't seem to have a cap on these things. I have a vacant house across the street that's been vacant for about 3 years. There's nothing to say that could not turn into another Airbnb. I have sick, people of ailing health on our street. There's nothing to say that these couldn't be Airbnbs. We'd be left with 2 residents on the street, which would be me and two of the neighbors who are also here in the waiting room or ready to speak. So no density, no cap. I don't understand why there's no special zoning, like a commercial or a multifamily zoning for the way these Airbnbs are starting to infiltrate the town. I don't think the city of Eureka would allow a multifamily apartment to come in, and I don't see the reason why there's like this differentiation between a short-term Airbnb versus a multifamily unit or some sort of other short-term renting facility of that nature. The other thing I kind of have concern on is there's really no annual revisit. It's like once this thing gets approved or may be approved, they just go on forever, and there's really no annual revisit. The Airbnb that's one of the 2 that's on the street now is not maintaining their landscaping. I tend to weed eat their yard because I get sick of looking at it. So it's these kind of things that infiltrate the Airbnb. I agree with other participants that I've heard speak and the lack of housing, and I just didn't want to take my time with that, but I agree with those theories. The thing I do want to say that I appreciate are the house rules that have been put in place. I appreciate that they had some concern on the neighborhood and how we interact. I live here for 13 years across the street from this place. I'm raising my family at this house. It's everything for me to have this house and to raise my family here. So I feel that this project greatly affects me, and that's kind of why I'm concerned in speaking at the meeting.
Thank you. Anyone else online with the hand up or who would like to speak?
I don't see any.
I don't know how to do this.
Oh, we can hear you.
Terry, we can hear you,
Okay.
so go ahead, sir. You have 3 minutes.
Okay. My name is Terry Harris. I live at 3534 J Street. And I'd like to oppose this also for a couple of reasons. It's just been, well, it's always a pain. Like I said in my written report to you that everybody wants to park and block the way into my house. I don't see why it can't be left as a monthly, at least minimum rental. Lance and Tracy will still be able to use the house when they feel like they want to. We just won't have the short-term people coming and going. I think that's a better use for our neighborhood. A month-long minimum is at least you know who's coming and going. I don't know if I can make a comment on this or not, but one of your presenters was talking about using funds that you guys put into a thing to make monies available from the taxes and all that so people can build a house, you know, that want to live here. My question about that, if I can even say this, is where the property going to come from? I mean, there's hardly any lots left in Eureka city limits to build on. So I don't see where you're going to get more housing inside the city limits. You're just taking away all the houses and making them into Airbnbs. So it is difficult for renters to find places. I used to have a rental property and I had people calling me all the time wanting to rent that property. And to the point where, anyway, they would almost argue over it sometimes. And the last thing I'd like to ask is, if you do approve this, does that mean that the people that are renting it have to use the driveway and garage? They can't park out on the street? That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Harrison. You had a few questions in there, and just so you know, we don't address those questions directly during public comments. Some of them may get addressed during commissioner discussion.
All right. Thank you.
Anyone else on the online who would like to speak? Looks like we have someone in the house who. Go ahead. Come on up.
Hi, my name is Carla Marino. I was actually here for a later agenda item, but I did want to comment that I also, as a resident of Eureka, agree that there shouldn't be another vacation rental, especially in this area. And I appreciate that the community, it sounds like the neighborhood has really come together and voiced that. Especially since you're all sending out these public hearing notices, I hope you take into account when it sounds like there's a majority of people on that block, when you're asking for their opinion, what they think should happen in that space. So that's it. I just wanted to also voice my opposition to this vacation rental. Thanks.
Thank you. Anybody else? Going once, twice? Okay, we're going to move it into the commission. I'd like to hear if someone's ready to give a motion in a second, and we can discuss based on that motion being on the floor.
Well, I think even though we weren't really eligible to have a discussion last time, I think I still mentioned this, so I'm probably just going to start where I left off, which was I don't see any reason why we can't make this permit subject to review. It is singling out this application, and I'm always sensitive to, that kind of an effect when you don't apply things equally. But what we're dealing with here is a carrying capacity question on some level. And so they came late to the party, and now it's seeming that the neighborhood's kind of feeling like we've hit the limit. And that may or may not be, things may or may not be as bad as everyone is expecting them to be, but we won't ever have a chance, as some of the speakers have said, to find out if we just approve it carte blanche. So I think if we were to move forward tonight, I would feel comfortable approving it under a with a provision and the conditions added to require that a report be made to us within a specific amount of time. I think I threw out a year just as a way to kind of get the conversation started. And that would provide a forum for neighbors to reappear and say they were supposed to park in the driveway. They didn't park in the driveway. They were supposed to, keep their guests, from making a lot of noise after 10 o'clock. We heard noise, So I think that's the kind of stuff that can influence whether or not this ends up being a good fit or a bad fit, and I don't know how we'll ever find out. So that's something, and I'd be interested to see what other members of the commission feel is appropriate. But if we were to approve it tonight, that would be something I would be looking for.
My understanding, Principal Planner Kenyon, is that if we approve this without a motion, an addition for review, we approve it in perpetuity. Is there a review at some point?
The minor use permit runs with the land, but to get a vacation rental, you also need a vacation rental permit, which is the administrative permit. And like I said, that one already, it's a annual renewal thing. And so you need both to operate. So if we imposed a cap, we'd impose it on the vacation rental permits. And so you would have the minor use permit forever, but you wouldn't be able to exercise it because you wouldn't be able to get your vacation rental permit.
And to be clear, I'm not suggesting that we do a kind of proto cap here. It's really just, we can either deny it tonight and say we think that it's not possible to have another one of these with the number that are already in this area and have to make our findings for that. Or if we're going to try to test the waters, I think a way to kind of see whether or not it is truly a nuisance after beginning operation at a shorter interval, that we get a chance to review it and see at some point, at some interval. So it would be independent of any cap.
I did talk to our legal counsel at length about this, and actually Attorney Black is on the Zoom if we have questions for him. I talked to Attorney Luna, our other attorney, and she wasn't comfortable with that because currently our code is written so that it's going to be hard for me to explain in paraphrase what she said, but basically, there is this process of revocation built into the code, and there isn't a process for limited term permits that then get reviewed. So it seems as if you're trying to create a power that doesn't exist in the code currently, and there is this other way to deal with it that is in the code, so it doesn't seem appropriate to carve out a different way of dealing with it.
Clarify what the existing way to do it would be, like what flexibility that might give the commission to sort of meet in the middle on this one, given that it is more contentious.
The revocation process. So if there's both a list in the vacation rental chapter and a list at the end of the code in Article 4 about different ways that you can revoke a permit, and it would come back to the planning commission. And it looks like Caitlin might have her code. Okay.
Yeah, in the vacation rental permit section, there's specifically 5 different things listed, and I can read them for you about how the ways that a permit can be revoked. A director may revoke a permit for vacation rental use upon finding one or more of the following: the proprietor, property owner, or emergency contact has been negligent in responding to an emergency situation more than 2 times in a rolling 12-month period. More than 2 documented law enforcement violations related to the vacation rental have occurred in a rolling 12-month period. The vacation rental use has been chronically non-compliant with the requirements of this subsection. I just want to note in this one of the requirements of the subsection is signage. I think that one of the public commenters noted that there is a sign, and there's a limit on vacation rental signs, and they can only be 2 square feet. So if right now they have a 24 square foot sign, that's also a violation. So the vacation rental owner has failed to pay required transient occupant taxes despite warnings from the finance department, and the proprietor, property owner, has failed to correct noted building or fire code violations. So these are ways that the director could revoke the permit. There's additional ways that a permit can be revoked, like Director Kenyon had mentioned in our permit revocation section of the code, so which would add other ways to this.
Can you read that section, Caitlin?
Yeah. And so then under the use permit revocation process, It's the applicant or property owner has altered the circumstances under which the permit was granted to a degree that one or more of the findings required to grant the original permit can no longer be made. Number 2, permit issuance was based on misrepresentation by the applicant, either through omission or embellishment of a material statement in the application or in the public hearing testimony. 3, one or more conditions of approval or mitigation measures have been violated or have not been complied with or fulfilled. 4, the applicant or property owner has failed to refuse to allow inspections for compliance. 5, improvements authorized by the permit are in violation of the zoning code or any other law, ordinance, regulation, or statute. 6, the use or structure is being operated or maintained in a manner which constitutes a nuisance.
Can I just clarify? I'm not suggesting a limited term. So under my proposal, it would be the same term that everybody gets, unlimited. No term limit set. It would really just be a milestone of a public notice, a hearing, a report on performance, and then if there were troubling things that we were hearing, we could ask that we schedule it for a revocation hearing. Not that night, but it would be the starting of salvo of, okay, we're going to begin the process already in the code that we can apply to any use permit to revoke it because issues are emerging that are a nuisance or compliance with the conditions is not being, observed, any of those things that might be revealed. So that's kind of what I mean, not a term limit that would be unique to this, if that makes it any more palatable legally.
If I may, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, go
ahead. This is Bob Black, Deputy City Attorney. I think the thing about that might give us concern is that you have X number of vacation rentals in the city and you're applying a term to this permit, somebody who's trying to follow the process, and they're the only one subject to this condition. I think that it might be feasible that there be reviews of virtually all permitted vacation rentals, or I should say not virtually all, but all, on some schedule that would allow you to explore the compliance of individual vacation rentals with the conditions that could result in a revocation or modification of the permit. But that would be a legislative matter and would have to come back to you separately. It's just the singling out of a single property for this particular kind of treatment would require, I think, findings that would have to be supported by evidence. And I'm not sure that either staff or anybody is prepared at this point to suggest what those might be. So I think those are the concerns.
Go ahead, Michael.
So there were two questions that neighbors had that stuck with me. The signage one, that's very helpful. The other was, the sort of, the applicant is required to provide to parking places. What happens if the people don't use them? And can we make it a condition that those are used rather than just that the applicant has to provide them?
What I can say is that when we originally received this application, there was discussion before we had received the survey and we knew where the driveway was on their property. There was discussion of exploring putting a vehicle limit on it. So as of right now, the condition of approval is that they are required to provide these 2 parking spaces. And if the commission wanted to, they could additionally condition the permit to a 2 vehicle maximum. So that would imply that the vehicles then couldn't be on the street or something to that effect.
Yeah, imply and require 2 different things.
Yeah, or require.
I'm sure that when I went to look at this property myself, I parked in somebody's front yard. I'm positive of that. I was one of those scofflaws who did that for 10 minutes. But, it's a challenging geography to that.
If we felt like the site wasn't appropriate for a vacation rental unless they were required to park on site, then that could be a condition.
Go ahead, Stephen.
Yeah, and I know. I mean, the wording of the revised is that they're required to inform all rental guests in writing prior to arrival. Vehicles can't be parked blocking the neighbor's gate or the public right of way. But that's not a requirement that they park in the driveway. Just that they be available for parking.
Correct. Right now, it's just that you wouldn't get in trouble if you were parking elsewhere.
Anywhere but those two places.
Yeah.
Basically, yeah. So, I mean, that gets to the heart of what I'm suggesting with the visitation is that. Sorry, I turned my mic off. Much like that, we're saying in that case, should we require that they use those spaces in front of the garage or in the garage? We're saying this is a kind of a unique situation where on-street parking isn't ubiquitous and is challenged. So we believe specialized conditions are relevant, even though the code makes it clear that you don't have to have off-street parking. But in this case, we think you do. I mean, we have that latitude through the use permit process. We have to make the findings to do that and explain what the context is. And I'm saying the findings in the context of what I was suggesting earlier is that we have 3 neighbors that are directly opposite this, that already experienced 2 vacation rentals, that are suggesting this is too much, and that they're skeptical about the ability of the applicant to perform based on current and prior use. So checking to see if that would be the context for the findings that I would ground any kind of specialized requirement in. It's not, that we're just feeling like doing that because tonight we felt, that we're hearing testimony and there's factors environmentally that suggest we may be at a limit for this area and that it wouldn't be appropriate to burden the area with another vacation rental given the volume that already exists. So, I mean, I know that might not be something we can do tonight because the resolution isn't written for that outcome and it might have to come back to us, but that would be the kind of, I'd be interested to see if our attorney could speak to whether they believe we can craft findings should we go in that direction, because that's, I think, the way it would be done.
Attorney Black, would you like to respond to that question?
I'd be happy to if I can. Could the commissioner perhaps just elaborate a little on the condition that you wish to impose?
The condition would be something along the lines of that this reappear before the Planning Commission a year from the date of issuance at a notice public hearing, whereby we receive comments and a report on the performance under the permit.
So to clarify further, you're not suggesting that we revoke their permit or make it only a 1-year permit. This would not be a special case in that it was a shorter term permit or that they were necessarily at danger of losing it. It would purely be a condition to have them return for a hearing.
Correct.
Okay.
And just to clarify, I say that because we have ways to initiate revocation based on the things that Caitlin mentioned, and those are going to be there whether we put them into the conditions or not. That trigger doesn't get pulled very often. So this would just be the opening salvo for considering that if we go down that path in the future.
So there's one specific concern, as I understand it, parking. I'm going to assume that the signage gets dealt with at the staff level because the rule sounds pretty clear and the violation sounds pretty clear if the facts are correctly stated. The parking, I understand you're having a hard time getting a handle on it because you can require what be done on site, but it's difficult to regulate the guests as they show up and, park wherever seems to be the most convenient or the most logical for their purposes. And you want to come back in a year and evaluate the parking at the site and presumably hear from the neighbors on that subject. Is that correct?
Well, that's good to ask. I would say we could probably brainstorm a few other things. Perhaps another might be the volume of traffic on the road, the safety to the neighborhood that comes with more vehicle trips that we're hearing testimony that might be in danger. I know these are a lot more squishy, but that's where I think there are other concerns that we're hearing that we won't find out until it's in operation whether they're truly warranted.
Well, let me put it this way. I have a concern that there's no regular process or regular order to the concept of coming back for evaluation. It's a rule that's going to apply to this one property, and presumably you could eclectically require it going forward, as you consider future permits. I think it would be vastly preferable to have a rule that says that among other things that need to be thought of is the burden to staff. If every, vacation rental unit has to come back, certainly I would think an annual basis would be very unreasonable without, staffing up for this purpose. What I do feel comfortable with, I believe, is there seem to be a unique set of circumstances related to the parking. And so I don't think it's unreasonable for you to request a report in 12 months on that specific subject, partly because parking is addressed not in the terms that perhaps might be ideal for this property, but parking is one of the elements that is a requirement, and the failure to adhere to that requirement could result in a revocation. And so I think it's within your discretion to request a report in 12 months or some other appropriate time period to see how the parking is working out. As you said, that would not result in revocation, would not necessarily result or ipso facto result in a revocation proceeding. But of course, that's a potential, but it's a potential for every vacation rental in the city on that and other grounds. So I think you can do that. And particularly in light of the testimony with regard to this particular property. But I think I would limit it to that unless you have something else that's equally called out. The parking issue to me seems kind of unique, that the parking could be provided on site and yet nobody use it. I think that's a regulatory concern.
Yeah, thank you for that input. I want to share that I also have a concern with the reporting process 1 year out, is that we're create sort of this environment of watchdogs, and that we're encouraging neighbors to keep an eye out, on what's happening at that particular rental. And one of our policies here is to protect and enhance the integrity of Eureka's existing neighborhoods, and so I have a little bit of a concern in permitting with this condition of review in a year of sort of setting up a contentious environment for a long period of time, and that's just I'm not sure how to deal with that, but that's just a concern.
Can I jump in?
Yes,
That
ma'am.
was also a concern of the applicant. They emailed us and called us, and they were really concerned about the potential for the, it becoming a thing where their neighbors are policing neighbors, and it creates a bad vibe in the neighborhood for that year. And that was what they were most concerned about.
I was saving my comments until the end since I wasn't at the last hearing, and I was just curious to hear how the other commissioners had percolated on it since the last time. But I just wanted to kind of put out there pretty clearly that I'm very uncomfortable with the idea of denying this permit outright. I think that the applicants made a good faith effort to adhere to the rules as they understood them. They worked with staff for a pretty long time before coming to hearing. I think it's definitely appropriate to try and find conditions to reduce impacts, and it sounds like, at least to a certain extent, they really do want to try and be good neighbors. These applicants do, and they're willing to be flexible. So, you know, with that being said, I just do have another kind of quick question on the revocation process. It sounds like what you were saying, Melissa, is that if there are more than 2 police calls, or I don't remember the number, 2 or 3 complaints from neighbors, that would be subject for a revocation hearing within a calendar year. Is that correct? Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah, there are a couple of those that specifically outline numbers, like the emergency situation. The emergency contact is fails to respond 2 or more times in a rolling 12-month period. That's one of them. And then another one is 2 documented law enforcement violations related to the vacation rental in a rolling 12-month period. Whereas the third one, the vacation rental use has been chronically non-compliant with the requirements of this subsection, doesn't have a time limit, nor does it define the word chronically.
But those ones are in the vacation rental section, and there are things that the director could just revoke the permit without any sort of hearing, correct?
Yes.
Whereas if they're non-compliant with the conditions, that's in the back of the code, and that would be a hearing before the planning commission to revoke.
Yeah. And, you know, like I said, I think that, you know, it's not it's not good planning to try and enforce a rule that other properties haven't been subject to. We should make the rule proactively and then apply it consistently. That's the way I prefer to do business as a commissioner. And I think that's really what our role is to provide that guidance and try and think big picture instead of on a project by project basis. And it seems like for this project, we can make the findings, and there really aren't any things that we can point to that are clearly, you know, prohibiting us from making the required findings. And that's where my source of discomfort is. That being said, you know, I agree. It sounds like parking and also access are issues. It sounds like the signage issue will be covered by the existing regulations. And if they, you know, put up a 100 square foot sign, they'll be calling staff, I'm sure, and requesting that it be removed. You know, so you had asked Vice Chair Benson if we were ready to make a motion. I'll put one on the table so we can discuss it. And I'm happy to add some of the conditions that have been raised. And if we can't get a vote, then we can see what the next step would be. So just to pull the commission really quick, I heard, you know, ensuring that they do park on site, potentially requiring some kind of report to the commission on parking. And I would maybe even want to expand it to the full, you know, good guest guide or whatever other conditions are applied, because things like access were mentioned in addition to parking. And I think that that's valid. And maybe just having that, you know, report, we could potentially, this is a little bit of a tangent, so bear with me here, but we could potentially even require an annual report on any vacation rental where a requested hearing has been set, and potentially that could even apply to things we've already approved if we make that rule going forward. And that could potentially address, you know, Black's concern about singling out this one site, but could allow us to set a rule in future that could bring them back in for a report. So were there any other items that a commissioner would like to add before I make a motion conditioning the project to reduce impacts? I can see you thinking about it, Commissioner Lazar.
Yeah, I mean, it's really a matter of like trying to distill what we heard from public testimony into like idiosyncratic things that are needing a review. And I don't think I could probably brainstorm anything that's concrete enough to add to that. I think Attorney Black is right. We don't have the specifics enough to warrant that. I would offer, we have two other sites. Are they both principally permitted owner? Like, are the two that exist besides this one? Do we know whether they were what flavor they are?
I know at least one of them was the minor use permit that didn't
result in a
there
hearing.
was no request for hearing.
I just wonder, in the interest of equal treatment, why not have the hearing a review of all of them? That's not a revocation hearing. It's just a feedback, like, how's the neighborhood doing? You know, oh, this one, you know, we heard testimony tonight. Oh, that one doesn't take care of their landscaping in front of their house. Well, that's not a condition of approval, but, you know, but whatever, that kind of feedback, would we be able to do that? Or does that even sound fitting? Because we do have kind of a geographical area where these all would live, essentially. But to be clear to your question, I don't think I'd be interested if any of the other commissioners heard testimony. They could boil down to like something that gets revisited at the hearing. But I don't think I could describe anything else besides the parking and.
I think the site access too was another one. You know, just and again, it wouldn't be necessarily to change anything, but just to hear have they made good on their commitments to adhere to the conditions of the permit.
Commissioner Freitas, I would be probably not supportive of a motion that included annual review as a regular thing for all, you know, for all minor use permits for vacation rentals. I just don't think, you know, more government is always the answer. I would like to have a more streamlined process like the one that's in place, but I would favor a motion that called out specific findings for this particular property that we would want a review on. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, and I totally agree. And I think that was the other reason that I'm, you know, really encouraging us to coordinate with staff on having some of these conversations at a more high level and trying to figure out how we can create accountability outside of a specific project hearing, because it does just become so much more emotional. Understandably, you know, this is people's biggest asset, and you know, where they live their lives is their homes. So it makes sense, I think, to try and push forward that conversation, but not tie it to this particular project. Okay, so with that being said, I'm going to make a motion that the Planning Commission adopt a resolution finding the project is exempt from CEQA and conditionally approving a minor use permit for a vacation rental at 3539 J Street. And in addition, I am adding to that motion that in 1 year, not annually, but in 1 year, we receive a report that will receive a public notice similar to this hearing on not only parking and access, but the full list of conditions from the included memo, and if it's separate, also the good guest guide provided. And I would also add a condition to require that parking be provided within the driveway and or in the garage, and that information be provided to all guests as part of their good guest guide or equivalent. Let me know if you need me to repeat that.
I'd just like clarity on the second condition that you said.
Yeah, me too.
So this would be to limit parking for guests to the garage and the driveway, no parking on the street. And that would be something that would be provided to the guests in advance of them staying.
Could we say it like this, like require that all guests park exclusively in the driveway or garage?
Yes, I'm comfortable with that.
Okay. And I'm comfortable seconding that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Was that able to be captured in writing yet?
Yes, the only bit I'm hung up on is how to pay for the noticing of this.
Right.
we do send out postcards after they go through the whole process. They get their building inspection, and they get their business license, and then we give them the vacation rental permits, the last thing you get, and then we send out to the 300s around them postcard with the information for the emergency contact. 200. Oh, only 200 feet. So that's a notice we're already doing. Otherwise,
isn't there a way to collect a deposit for staff time to coordinate it and require that the applicant pay for the deposit for the?
If I can chime in, we had discussion at the May 8th meeting about this condition being to the cost would be on the applicant, and I think that Senior Planner Castellano made a good suggestion that possibly we could add that into the condition, that verbiage.
Does that sound okay?
Yeah, if there's a mechanism for it, I'm comfortable with that being passed on to the applicant. And if not, maybe we just need to eat this one, given that it's contentious.
And is it 12 months from the MUP approval or from when they get their final go ahead to start renting?
I would say 12 months from final.
Okay.
If I might, again, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
This is Attorney Black. I have a problem with what appears to be a regulation that would be imposed on the conduct of the guests in this particular unit. I think it's possible that the city of Eureka has regulatory authority to apply conduct regulation to individual guests in vacation rentals, but a requirement imposed through the planning process that all guests must park in the garage or driveway only. I don't see how we enforce that absent a general ordinance where the city council weighs in and makes it, effectively makes it an infraction or something like that if that's violated. Do you understand what I'm saying? The way that the motion was phrased, it appears to say all guests must do this. So I think the original concept that the information provided to the guests must include an admonition that they should park only in the driveway or the garage is quite reasonable and quite enforceable. But the other way, applying it directly to the guest conduct, I'm concerned that that's not going to be enforceable. And it's going to be a source of conflict and city staff frustration.
This definitely seems very nuanced, but I think I understand what you're suggesting, which is not that we ourselves are putting on that condition. We're just requiring them to put it in writing and assuming that they will make good on that. Am I understanding that correctly? The difference being we're not going to go out with our code enforcement officers and stake out this vacation rental.
Stake out the guests themselves.
Right.
Yeah, that is what I'm saying. And I think that I think that you can clearly require that the owner of the unit must provide certain information to the incoming guests. And I don't think that's unenforceable. I think, that from time to time they could be asked to provide that information. I don't know that that needs to be in the motion, but I think staff would be cognizant that's something they could ask for, a month down the road and roughly every 6 months after that. So yeah, that's my thinking on it.
Yeah, I would say that's close enough to my intent. I'm comfortable with just making sure that that's clarified in the motion, that this would be language that we are conditioning be provided, as part of the good guest guide, as opposed to saying guests shall do this and that's a condition. And I, feel comfortable sticking with that because we have definitely done that in the past. There's precedent of that being done by this body, and it seems to have been acceptable.
Right.
Commissioner Freitas, since you originated the motion, I want to make sure the motion that we're going to vote on tonight reflects what we're talking about. The addition to what was prepared by staff was, to receive a report in 1 year, and to limit parking to the spaces provided. Would you be comfortable with changing that limit parking to spaces provided that the owners will the owners will have in the guest guide guidance as to where parking is allowed?
And I guess I'm just scratching my head because it seems like the difference, and I'd be interested to see if Attorney Black can confirm this, is we're sort of laundering the condition in the house rules so that the applicant pledges to do it instead of it being a requirement of the permit, and then it's okay, but we're sort of strong-arming them to do that by our requirement that the house rules be amended to admonish guests for parking anywhere but the two places. Is that the way I'm understanding it?
Well, my concern, and I hope I'm not, trying to describe angels dancing on the head of a pin, but I think the way that the motion was phrased, it appeared to want to regulate directly the conduct of the guests. And I don't think, I think we could have jurisdiction over guests, but we're not there. I think that would require probably an ordinance as opposed to a planning regulation or condition. So I think we can regulate the conduct of the owners, and I think we should do that by requiring that they pass along critical information to the guests. And I think that's achievable rather than unenforceable. So that's my thinking.
And I think, importantly, the outcome should be the same, hopefully. So with that being said, could someone on staff maybe repeat what they understood the motion to be back to us to confirm it before we take a vote?
I'll take a stab at it. The Planning Commission, I guess I'd have to see the motion because I have the conditions written down here. I move the Planning Commission adopt a resolution finding the project is exempt from CEQA, conditionally approving the minor use permit for vacation rental at 3539 J Street with 2 added conditions. 1, requiring the project receive review in 1 year with a report of the vacation rentals compliance related to parking, access, and conditions, as well as the good guest guide. And a condition requiring guests to park in on-site, the 2 parking spaces provided on-site, and that the applicant update their good guest guide to require the parking on-site in writing, to provide this in writing to guests prior to arrival. Something like that.
Yeah, I think that sounds good. I guess the one thing I would maybe say is for the first part of that additional condition, maybe removing the word review in 1 year and just say, a duly noticed report. I think that would be closer to my intended language.
And I think that first condition could also be the verbiage at a notice public hearing at the cost of the applicant.
And the 1 year is from final.
Yeah, maybe just a sentence at the end of the first one, just saying costs will be borne by the applicant for this.
Is the motion maker and the seconder comfortable with the motion that's been created?
Yes, and thank you for this multi-brain creation we have made together.
Okay, any other discussion from commissioners?
I'm going to vote no on this. Just want to say why. I feel like in absence of this framework, and normally I would follow Commissioner Freitas into the through the gates of hell. And she almost had a motion that could thread me into this, but I just feel like this is one of those neighborhoods that has experienced a lot of this, and so I'm happy to be on the losing end of a 3-1 vote. But I would much prefer a policy framework. I'd really encourage when we have that discussion in a month that we look at ways that it's neighborhood specific or something else like that. But I am going to vote no for this because of the concerns of the neighbors.
Okay, that's good to know in advance. I was also going to vote no on this, which is disturbing because it's not helping the applicants or the work of staff, but for very different reasons. You know, for me, I'm just struggling with vacation rentals overall and having a clear policy guidance from City Council. I mean, this is really a political question, not a planning commission question. But for me, you know, the policy to protect and enhance the integrity of Eureka's existing neighborhoods, the LU 5.5. I just don't believe that vacation rentals in general do that. I can't concur with staff saying that is met by vacation rentals. I think if we put a referendum out to the city of Eureka to sharply limit and cap vacation rentals, my guess is that it would, based on all the input we get on every time this comes up and the letters against it, that it would pass with a landslide. I think in listening to to what the community wants as well as what code says and what the general plan says, I'm not sure that this is. I'm hesitant to move forward without better guidance from the city on this, to the Planning Commission on this issue. Also, the policy H51 to balance the need for housing of long-term and short-term rentals and maintain a cap. I just don't, that hasn't been done. It's in our general plan to do that, but we haven't done that, and so I'm thinking that I'm a no every time this comes up until we have clear guidance.
I just want to I want to get clarity on what I think I heard my fellow commissioner say. I'll start with you, Commissioner Benson. I think what I'm hearing you say is you don't see a way to approve this proposal at this time with the framework we have.
It seems to me that it flies in face of all the other work that this commission and city planning is trying to do with creating more housing, more affordable housing. It seems to actually go against that and work against that, and so it doesn't seem. It just doesn't seem like that it's wise. There's just basic wisdom there, and just again, I've talked about this before, but I just think that given the needs for housing around here, both through Cal Poly Humboldt student housing and medical professional retention, and what's coming up with Nordic Aqua Farms and Humboldt Offshore Wind, our need for housing is so acute that reducing a big percentage of it, which seems to be a much larger percent than we think, into the vacation rentals just doesn't seem wise to me at the community level, and it doesn't seem fully to meet the general plan. I think the general plan really supports having a balance, which I need to have a better understanding of what that balance looks like, and it specifically says to maintain a cap, and we haven't done the work to do that yet. So I really feel like I need to see that or have discussion. So maybe the next meeting, Commissioner Freitas has proposed that we really dig into this policy making around this, and I hate to to make Lance and Tracy lightning rod folk on this particular issue, but we've reached a tipping point, in my opinion, on this particular issue.
And since I was going to ask, Commissioner Kraft, would you say that I'm not saying you have the same reasons, but you're struggling similarly to find a way to approve this proposal?
Well, if you think of a Venn diagram, where I overlap with Commissioner Benson is that we both are not finding sufficient policy grounds, sufficient backup for what makes sense. or in Commissioner Benson's place, he's finding policy that runs the other direction. In this case, it's funny. I'm not a parking guy, but the parking situation, like your 58 Roadmaster is not going to fit in those spots, and on an icy day might not be able to get out of that driveway if it did. There really isn't any other place to be. I think the neighbors are being, I don't think they know the code 100% and that kind of thing, but I think the spirit of what they're describing is accurate, that their neighborhood is not what they signed up for, or is trending that way. And so, with the kind of strictures that Attorney Black has put on what we can do, I don't think, that's what makes me think I cannot vote for this. And I'll be honest, I would have been a yes vote a month ago. But this is something that I ruminated on, and hearing from the neighbors again, and I'm comfortable that this is the right thing tonight.
Any other
Is
comments?
it worth taking a vote
Well, we need to.
procedurally?
Let's do that.
Yes.
Yeah, unless you withdraw, yeah. But I guess just since we've saying our piece, and I just think this is not as good a time as any to just say the way I look at the code and the plan is that it provides a pathway, and it starts each applicant off in, it divides the pool of vacation rental into, you're either in the below radar, you live there and operate it, and no one's going to have any way to unravel as long as you meet all the requirements, and you can't appear at the planning commission. 2, you're not going to live there. You're going to have a absentee manager that's within a certain radius, and then we're going to field it out with your neighbors, and if they want to have a hearing, it's going to go to the planning commission, and that's where we are. So in each of those situations, it allows for the community to rise up and speak to what's the particular issues that are at play, that are idiosyncratic to this location, to this, and then we have to decide, can we make the findings? Is it consistent with is it going to be detrimental to public health, safety, and welfare as a finding for all of our permits? Is it going to be consistent with the general plan and zoning code? Parking is a requirement. It's not specifically enumerated, but to the extent that on-street parking in the area is not really readily available, that's relevant to this. So each one of these that bubbles up to us, we got to wrestle with, are the findings able to be made? And I don't have any problem with specialized conditions in service of trying to make them. And if we can't, say la vie, but I think we have the latitude under the code. That's the whole point of making it discretionary and providing a forum at the planning commission in those situations where it needs it. So I appreciate my other commissioners' comments. That's my perspective on the way I'll be approaching these in the current policy framework.
And Commissioner Lazar, it is, I owe part of this to you, that you're more than anyone the one who's educated me on what a conditional process is about. So, I am more comfortable making decisions in the gray.
Any other comments from commissioners? Okay, I think it's time to put this to the vote. I think we need to do a roll call vote for this.
Sorry. Commissioner Benson?
No.
Commissioner Freitas?
Yes.
Commissioner Kraft?
No.
And Commissioner Lazar?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion fails.
So the motion has failed. So the commission has not taken an action on this vacation rental yet. So somebody could suggest another motion at this point.
I think we had a casual motion from Commissioner Freitas about putting the development of a policy on this on our next agenda, and I know it's very short notice to give staff that kind of workload, but I think getting a recommendation from staff on how to proceed with this topic in general in terms of caps and the like would be beneficial.
We'll definitely put that on the next agenda. But this vacation rental, you guys have not acted on yet. You have neither approved it nor denied it at this point.
Correct. And I guess I have a question for our attorney, since we have the benefit of that tonight. Do we need to postpone our decision on this so that we can have the resolution reflect findings specific to the failure of the motion to approve the project? Or another potential thing I could see us doing is making a motion that we, as a commission, acknowledge that we have failed to have sufficient votes to take action, and then make that approval vote for, is that a way to kind of sort of end this without, or do we need those findings?
Well, I think in order for the Planning Commission to act under the code as it's presently written, a majority of the members of the Planning Commission are required to take any affirmative action. That means 3 votes. That's probably not a good idea. I think in parliamentary procedure of small boards and bodies like this, a majority of the quorum is probably a better policy, but that's not the way the code is currently written. What I need to do is discuss with City Attorney Luna whether or not the failure to provide 3 votes to this motion creates an appealable, not appealable inaction, let's just put it that way, that could go up to the city council, or whether that is simply has to be taken as a no action or 0 action on the application, and therefore it's bumped over to the next meeting for additional consideration.
Yeah, we printed the bylaws for you guys today, and it says in here, in case of a tie vote or deadlock, the chair shall have the item of business placed on the next agenda of the commission for reconsideration and vote.
That's what I would support, a motion that did that. I don't want to bury this, and and it is a lightning rod. I'll just admit that. And as soon as I feel that there's a little clearer policy, this is a motion that I will likely vote yes on in the future, once I understand the background, feel like there's a better guiding policy.
At the next hearing, we'll put talking about a policy on the agenda, but we will definitely not be at the point at the end of that where we will have an adopted policy, because it'll have to be written, and then it'll have to go to multiple bodies. It'll just be the first step in that process.
Even seeing the train leaving the station on that is going to carry a lot of weight with me as a commissioner.
Another reason we need to fix this is because there is a Permit Streamlining Act, and we can't take forever to make a decision.
Understood. It's unfair to everybody.
I mean, I'm willing to switch sides for the purposes of expediency and vote no, but I don't think we should do that tonight. I think we should direct staff to prepare findings relevant to the discussion and the points that both of our original no votes were identifying, and then that can be agendized for the next meeting and we can vote on it, and I'd be willing to join you so we have a majority, and then they can be appealed to the city council if the applicant wants to move forward at that point.
So there'd be one more consideration here.
Well, it seems like that's our bylaw, so if we get a deadlock, we gotta push it for the next meeting to be considered, or fix the deadlock, which I don't see an easy fix unless someone else does. But I'm willing to commit to vote no in service of getting this out of our court.
So you're willing to vote no next month, but not tonight?
I don't think we're
we
prepared to
can
do that.
tonight.
We have a staff report and a resolution to approve the project. That's
Okay.
that's the suggested motion. We were trying to do that through some additional conditions, not
Yeah, I
trying
hear
to
you.
deny it.
Attorney Black, is that the case? We can't just have another vote now.
The rules say that if you voted in the affirmative on the original motion, you do have the right to move to reconsider the original motion. Well, let me think, because this was a tie vote, so there was no prevailing side. But I believe that a party that voted in one fashion has the right to move to reconsider and then change their vote. So yes, that could happen tonight. If it sounds like perhaps more than one commissioner is considering under what conditions they might change their vote, and so that would result in the right to a city council appeal. On the other hand, it might be productive to continue this discussion, because I understand there are several layers of complexity that apparently could result in a changed outcome. So it's up to the commission. But I do believe that the change of vote could occur tonight with a motion to reconsider.
Attorney Black, is there a particular benefit to the applicant if we were to do that?
Well, they'd save probably a month in moving their project forward or their application forward.
Because city council would take the decision.
Well, they would get it sooner. The city council would receive the matter sooner. And come to a decision. If the applicant wants an affirmative decision, I don't know that moving it to the city council gains them that, but it does gain earlier finality. Let's put it that way.
Thank you.
Through the chair, Attorney Black, can we, instead of reconsidering the original motion, which was to approve, make a new motion since the original motion failed?
Yes, the answer to that is yes, but the precondition is that there be at least 3 votes to reconsider the earlier vote. In other words, there has to be a motion to reconsider, a second, and 3 votes to say, yes, we're going to reconsider. Then it's on the floor to take a new motion and achieve a new outcome.
So I'm willing to, I'll just describe the whole thing. I'm willing to make that motion to reconsider, and then I'm willing to make a motion that we deny the permit, but I will be adding some language to the motion that is specific to the findings for the reason for the denial. And I can describe that, but is there interest in trying to take action tonight on denial? Or would you rather it appear next month and we'll have to decide again?
I do think it's advantageous to the applicant, with whom I'm pretty sympathetic, despite my vote, to move more quickly. I think there may actually also be advantages to this going to council, because I think we see this issue more than the council does. They have lots of fish to fry, but I think this would help.
You feel the same?
Yes.
Okay. So I'll make a motion that we reconsider the prior motion. Is that what you heard? and then I'm gonna make, and then what? I'm sorry. Yeah, does that sound right, Attorney Black?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
I'll second.
And Kraft will second that. Yeah.
It's also a motion that is supposed to proceed without debate. It's a privileged motion and not subject to debate.
Good. Let's have a roll call vote, please.
I didn't even get any of that typed. Excuse me. Commissioner Benson,
Yes.
Commissioner Freitas,
Yes.
Commissioner Kraft,
Yes.
Commissioner Lazar.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion
Motion
carries.
passes.
Okay, so I'm going to move that we deny the permit, and I move, so in moving that, I want to, with these following additional findings, which are the reason for the motion, which is we heard substantial public testimony, both tonight and in a prior meeting, in opposition to the project, raising concerns about safety of neighboring children, of the lack of available parking, both on-site and off-site, and past occupancy and conflict within the neighborhood, and the concentration of similar vacation rental uses in this area. And I guess I'll try to state something for my commissioners, and that the policy, there are policies in the general plan that this would conflict with. If you want to name the policy, do you want to include that? But if that's enough, we'll just leave it to the first ones. How about that?
I'll second that motion too.
Suppose you want me to roll call that again?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Commissioner Benson,
Yes.
Commissioner Freitas,
No.
Commissioner Kraft,
Yes.
Commissioner Lazar.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. I would, before we restart on the next one, I would like to ask for a 5-minute recess.
Of course.
Thank you.
One, Arwood Vacation Rental.
This is Senior Planner Caitlin Castellano presenting.
All right, good evening, commissioners. The project before you for your consideration tonight is the Arwood Vacation Rental Minor Use Permit, which proposes to utilize another existing single-family home as a vacation rental in the R1 Residential Low Zoning District. So 2604 Ice Street is located in the central portion of the city. Zooming in, it is directly south of Carson Park and Carson Street, between H and I Streets to the west and east, which are arterial streets, and Hayes Street to the south. It is surrounded by single-family residential properties. Zooming in even closer, 2604 I Street is on the southwest corner of Carson and I Streets. 2 off-street parking spaces can be accessed from the alley. As of the posting of the public hearing notice on the site, the fence, which was identified in the staff report as to be replaced, has been installed. Okay. Here is also a recent. Here is also a recent street view photo of the subject home when I posted the public hearing notice. So again, it's a vacation rental with no proprietor on site. It does require a minor use permit within a 3-bedroom, 1-bath, approximately 1,456 square foot, not 1,000, 1,456 square foot single family home on a 6,750 square foot lot, and the Eureka Municipal Code would allow up to 8 occupants. 2 paved off-street parking spaces, as I said before. Access from the alley are available, but the detached garage is not available to guests, and per the applicant, quiet hours are between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. No parties or events, and the notice of pending action, also known as the NOPA, was mailed to property owners within 300 feet of the property on April 14th, which described how to request the public hearing. Subsequently, a hearing was requested, and the concerns expressed generally pertain to lack of available housing for local residents, issues with previous occupants, and maintenance of the property. These concerns, except the issue related to previous occupants, are addressed in your staff report as they appeared in the original director's staff report. And then attachment 4, so that was attachment 3 was the letters received requesting the hearing. And then attachment 4 includes a letter from the applicant trying to address some of the concerns. So because the public hearing was requested, the Planning Commission is now taking action on the minor use permit. And to approve the use permit, the Planning Commission must make the required findings that the vacation rental is consistent with the General Plan and Zoning Code, suitable for the site, compatible with existing and planned uses in the vicinity, not detrimental to public health, safety, and welfare, and adequately served by public services and infrastructure. So the required findings to approve the application staff believes are outlined in the staff report, and we recommend you hold a public hearing and then adopt a resolution to find the project exempt from CEQA and conditionally approve the application. Here's a recommended motion, but of course we'll stop screen sharing for the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. You did great. Questions for staff? Hashed it out already, huh? No questions? Okay, we'll open it up to public comment. If you would like to speak on this matter, you can go ahead and raise your hand if you're in the Zoom, or come up. You'll have 3 minutes. Please state your name and city of residence. Come on up.
Hi, my name is Bernadette Arwood, and I'm the applicant for the minor use permit. Okay. Is it okay to start?
Yes.
All right. So hopefully the last hearing does not deter you from having an open mind on my project. But good afternoon, Planning Commissioners. My name is Bernadette Arwood, and I am the property owner of 2604 I Street. I'm here today to respectfully request that my application for a minor use permit be approved. My husband and I have owned our property for just over 10 years. During that time, we lived in our home for 5 years and rented out to 6 different renters after we moved out to our second home. Unfortunately, every renter that came along posed various landlord challenges for us. My hope is that by running a vacation rental, we can not only limit the challenges we have seen with long-term renters, but promote medical professionals to relocate here. This is a personal goal of mine, since my daughter has had to attend various medical appointments out of the county, which caused a substantial financial hardship for us. As such, we are happy to offer a discount to any medical professional renting our home while seeking employment or working as a traveling professional. Now, while the venture is positive and exciting, I can appreciate the concerns from some of my neighbors. However, I can assure you that I'm happy to address any concerns with conditions to my permit. Such conditions can be a no party clause, weekday, weekend curfew hours, and a maximum allowable occupant restriction. In addition, our accessory structure that Commissioner, I think, Lazar had pointed out when he passed by earlier is completely off limits, so that is not going to be used as an accessory place for people to stay. So I hope today I can answer any questions that your board may have so that we can move forward with the correct steps to have our permit approved, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Carolyn Yankee. Is this okay? I'm Carolyn Yankee, go by the nickname Katie. I've lived at 2635 H Street for almost 44 years now. When I first moved there, I was the young kid on the block. Now my husband and I are the old kids on the block. We have witnessed many changes in the neighborhood. Most of them have been good. For a while, we had a grow house next door that was taken care of, thankfully. And now the neighborhood is resurging with young children, young families, young children. They enjoy going to the park. They will soon be in the public school system. And I am concerned about having rotating people coming in and out of a home on this block where there are so many young children. It just doesn't seem to make sense to me. So my concern is about the neighborhood. I also am concerned. I think that we have enough short-term rental. I would urge you to wait and see if the city council will please put a cap or a moratorium on the short-term rentals until we can get the housing market more stable for more people. I do appreciate the effort that all of you have been putting into this evening, just to this one review of a short-term rental. And I appreciate the Arwoods' interest in helping the medical people find housing. But I think that doesn't fall into the short-term rental market. I think that falls into a long-term rental market. It's my belief that visiting nurses and doctors, attendings paid by a hospital are here for at least 3 months and a maximum of 1 year. That's a contract that the hospital would offer. In doing that, they're often paying the employee a greater salary than the local employees are receiving. And that's draining their budget at our hospital instead of helping our own public. One just little point, Carson Park eliminated many neighbors. In other words, when you do the 300 feet, a lot of neighbors weren't in that Carson Park. I just urge you, please consider deferring this to the city council for an alignment of capping short-term rentals. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Hello, my name is Carly Marino. I live at 2623 H Street, so on that block as well. And originally I was going to talk a lot about caps, but it seems like you all are working really hard on that. So I appreciate the thought that's going into this and hearing the public's kind of concern about vacation rentals, because everybody I talk to when I talk about a vacation rental coming in is concerned about the lack of housing. And that's all we're hearing about. So it's really great that that's part of the conversation. For this particular one, just looking at the staff report, I know one of the things that it said was it would not affect the character of the neighborhood. And I feel strongly that it actually will. Like Katie also pointed out, I think the majority of homes, or at least I think 5 homes of the 9, have children like under 5 on that block. And this alleyway is also closed off from other traffic. And so like I was thinking about it this weekend, there are kids just playing in that alleyway. It's going to be really hard to have a parking spot for a vacation rental business right next to the alleyway. And that's going to change the structure of that neighborhood. In addition, this is actually on the Mercer Historic Block. And so I think this has always been single family residence or rentals, but allowing a vacation rental is going to change the nature of that as well. And I think safety is also a concern when thinking about that report. And also just looking at the staff report and seeing what people wrote in, you actually have a majority of folks on that block saying that they don't want a vacation rental. And also mentioned before, a lot of Carson Park is part of that. So you're going to actually have less people receiving that postcard. And you did receive a lot of notes saying that they don't want that vacation rental. And I really actually commend the R-Word's statement that they want to have medical professionals here. And I think that's a great goal. But once again, that's not a vacation rental. That actually, in one of the letters that somebody sent in that's in the staff report, people have pointed out that they're actually not able to rent to medical professionals because vacation rentals are blocking that out. So I think those two things are kind of at opposite ends. My hope is that you would reject this application, but I'd really hope that the R-Woods would also consider having medical professionals here and kind of following through on what they want to do in their letter. So thank you again. Your commission seems like hard work. So I appreciate all the things that are coming forward and the opportunity for public comment.
Thank you, Ms. Moreno. Anyone else in attendance? And I do not see any hand raise on Zoom. All right, we will close public comment and I'll bring it back to the commissioners to make a motion.
I'll just say, I have the same feeling for this one as the last one, which is that this is an open application that followed the rules that were set. If there isn't commission motion to put forward findings of denial, if the conditions are not the same as the last permit, I will put forward a motion to approve it for the same reason that I put forward a motion for our last permit.
I do think the situation really matters, and this to me looks different. I'm happy to second this motion.
Okay, to be clear, I have not yet made it,
Yeah.
but that will be helpful for later.
Can you bring the motion up on the screen?
While you're doing that, I'm just gonna take a stab at trying to align myself with Commissioner Freitas in that I really struggle to see. The last situation gave us a lot of ammunition to bring to bear about localized issues that perhaps warrant us being unwilling to approve the proposal. But it really have to be a significant issue raised, and if there isn't, the findings that we have to work with, I don't want to be I just don't want to single out individual projects that don't rise above the rest of the pack as far as their issues. So that's why it really is a policy discussion, not a project level discussion to do that. And I don't, so I don't know. Is that kind of where you find yourself, or is it a little different?
Well, yeah, I think what I'm hearing you say, Commissioner Lazar, is that a denial should be something to be taken seriously based on some pretty unique conditions of the site, given that we've had hearings similar to this one, probably a half a dozen or more, where similar issues have been raised, and we've set the precedent of approving the project. So unless this particular permit, as completely separate from the one that we heard last time, also raises unique issues, we don't have grounds to deny it. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
I think we're both.
Am I putting words in your mouth here?
We're both using like way more words than we need to, but yeah, I think we're hovering around the same universe of stuff. And I do want to point out that the applicant has every right to, I'm not suggesting they do that, change from a what do we call this flavor? The one where we don't have the on-site.
Proprietor on site versus no proprietor on site.
Right. And then the end result is almost the same. You have people staying at this place that on a less than monthly basis, but you have someone who's living there. And that can happen without, despite anything we do tonight, approval or denial. So I just want to point out that there's no protection from that if they meet the findings of the code, I believe. So it's not as though it's a all or nothing. It's just this version where there's no one living there and there's people on a infrequent or a frequent basis turning over. That's what they're asking for tonight that we have.
Yeah, my thought, on this one is that I was happy to make a motion on the last one to approve it, and I am comfortable with the decision that was made, but I also do understand that there were some very unique circumstances, and the biggest one in my mind was the fact that it was a cul-de-sac with 6 parcels, 3 of which would be vacation rentals, and I think having a conversation about that density is something that we should do. And so I appreciate, the deliberation that the commission had about that. This one, even though my motion is the same, I feel like the conditions are different in that there's, a fair amount of street parking. Granted, the alley might create some differences, but, people will drive through an alley at different speeds and, have different ways they operate through life. And that is going to happen regardless of whether it's a short-term vacation rental or just someone moves in, you don't know who you're going to get. And so I feel like this one is just similar enough to ones that we've approved in the past, and they've met the conditions, that I would like to put forward a motion to approve it. And I'm not hearing any specific additional conditions to add, but I'll wait another moment before formally making the motion in case anyone wants to suggest anything additional that I'd be happy to add. Okay, I'm going for it. We're doing it. I move the Planning Commission adopt a resolution finding the project is exempt from CEQA and conditionally approving a minor use permit for a vacation rental at 2604 I Street.
And for the reasons I articulated before, I second.
Any discussion? No. We'll go to a vote.
Yeah, for the purposes of consistency, I just want to, restate why I have opposition, not to this particular application and project. In fact, I appreciate the Arwoods for wanting to do business in Eureka and wanting to, working so closely with staff and putting together, and with staff for putting together a good application, something that in any other time would probably get a unanimous yes, from this commission. But I also just want to, restate that I feel that we're, with each one of these that we approve without a policy, I'm concerned about our legacy of being that commission that kept doing the thing that was creating a problem because they didn't have guidance, and so I don't want to be that person. And I think that it really meets the policy, E63 to encourage year-round tourism and unique visitor experience that a B&B is, that an Airbnb is, different than a hotel. I get all the reasons why they're valuable and unique, and that we should have them in the city. It's just too much of a good thing is the question that I'm asking here, and I don't feel that the need for long-term and short-term housing rentals have been addressed. That policy, H51, and the general plan policy to protect and enhance the integrity of Eureka's existing neighborhoods, I think is still for me at question. And so this isn't about this project and any more than it was about the last one. But the reason you may be asking, why is Commissioner Benson putting his foot down now? I've voted yes to, I think, 4 or 5 of these since I've been a commissioner. I've also asked for guidance multiple times that I haven't received, and partly it's my newness as a commissioner, not knowing that I need to agendize that to develop policy. I just thought that that somehow that would just appear to us somehow guidance, and it didn't. So I apologize to the applicant and to the commission for my learning curve on how to be a commissioner. But it's hard for me to. I don't want to support one and not support the other, because my not wanting to support is really a general rule at this point rather than specific about this application.
And Commissioner Benson, I just want to say that is very well articulated and a very valid point.
I feel like I should say why I'm going to vote differently on this one than the last one. And it is because I think the density thing is neighborhood specific. And that overall, we can have an intelligent discussion about what's the right percentage. But in specific neighborhoods, it feels like it could get too high and has in the previous one. So, yeah, I've said my piece. I'll be happy to vote yes on this one.
So just offer that it might be useful for staff to provide us with a vicinity map that shows permitted and unpermitted units when these move forward to us, not just in the kind of update. Yeah.
I don't know if this is the appropriate time, so stop me, but I did look at that. I did a radius, and wrote it down from my brain because I forgot to bring what I actually did. So around 300 feet of the site, there were no vacation rentals. Around 500, there was one, maybe two. It was iffy. And then 1,200 feet, which now you're getting into closer to Henderson Center, was 5 to maybe 6.
Yeah, I think it'd be helpful. You just go out until you start hitting them and show those when these come forward to us.
I'll just say I do agree with you, Commissioner Benson. I felt like we were kind of raising a flag that we wanted some better direction, and I guess that hasn't been translated to council. So it is disappointing because I feel really conflicted every time these come up because I do understand the neighbors' concerns and that the applicants have followed, the guidance that's laid out. But it is, I agree with you, and I would have a hard time voting on this in a way that I feel comfortable with. We have a motion on the board, so if we'd like to take a vote, let's do a roll call vote.
Excuse me. Commissioner Benson?
No.
Commissioner Freitas?
Yes.
Commissioner Kraft?
Yes.
Commissioner Lazar?
Yes.
And Commissioner Meyer?
No.
Thank you. Motion carries.
Thank you. And thank you for using the opportunity of this hearing to have your voices heard. We appreciate that. We will move to F2, 5th and Myrtle right-of-way vacation surplus property.
This is our other awesome senior planner, Lisa Savage.
Good evening, commissioners. So moving from vacation rentals, we have before you the 5th and Myrtle right-of-way vacation and surplus property. And just to be clear, the city is the applicant for this. Here's a bird's eye view of the proposed vacation and surplus area. As a result of the 5th and R Street realignment, portions of the 5th Street and Myrtle Avenue rights-of-way became unnecessary for public road use. Caltrans relinquished and transferred portions of their 5th Street right-of-way to the city in 2003. Segment 1 is being retained by the city as a landscaped area, and Segment 3 is now a portion of the new Myrtle Avenue alignment. Segment 2 will be vacated and surplused, and the closed portion of Myrtle Avenue will also be surplused. Part of the right-of-way vacated by Caltrans was purchased directly from Caltrans by Pacific Outfitters. Here's a street view of the property from 4th Street looking south towards Pacific Outfitters. Currently, Pacific Outfitters uses the previous portion of the Myrtle Avenue right-of-way for parking and the small triangular area for signs. They have maintained and improved both areas for over 20 years and would like to purchase the properties from the city. A portion of the property to be surplused is in the coastal zone, shown in red, while the small triangular piece is in the inland zone. The property was appraised in 2017 for $33,000. Since there is some uncertainty as to whether the city or Pacific Outfitters has the underlying fee ownership for the small triangular piece of the 5th Street right-of-way, it will not be included in the cost. Here is the property for vacation and surplus. And here's the property showing the easements to be retained by the city. As you can see, there is only a small portion of developable property available, and it is landlocked between the two parcels owned by Pacific Outfitters. California Streets and Highway Code, Section 8300 at C, grants authority to vacate public right-of-way within city limits to the Eureka City Council through either a summary vacation or a general vacation. Per California Streets and Highway Code, Section 8330, the city is proposing a summary vacation as the property is a street or highway that has been superseded by relocation. The summary vacation is a shortened and more simple process than a general vacation. California Government Code Section 65402 requires that prior to the City Council vacating the public right-of-way, the location, purpose, and extent of the proposed vacation must be submitted to and reported upon by the Planning Commission as to the conformity with the adopted general plan. As discussed in the staff report, staff believes these findings can be made. The decision to declare the land surplus must be reviewed by the Planning Commission and a determination made whether the land is necessary for city's use, the parcels are of such size and shape to allow development of uses permitted in the zone in which it is located, and the disposition of the property is in conformance with Government Code Section 65402. There is no public project identified in the 2023 to 2028 Capital Improvement Program, which requires the subject properties. Discussion with city departments determined that the appropriate easements will be retained and there is no need to retain the city's fee interest in the land. Although the land is of adequate shape and size for commercial development or housing, the majority of it is covered with non-buildable city sewer and water easements, rendering it unsuitable for development and most appropriate for its current use as parking lot and grassy area. Finally, the adopted general plan and local coastal program are silent with regard to the necessity of retaining the subject land for city public use. In addition, there is no goal or policy within the adopted general plan or coastal land use plan that calls for the retention of the land for the city's public use. The Planning Commission's report will be submitted to the City Council for review, and if Council finds the property is not required for the city's use, it may be surplused. And then an established minimum acceptable offer will be drafted. Once council approves the vacation and disposition of the properties, the city is required to send written offers to sell or lease the land to appropriate local agencies for park and recreational and or open space purposes. If there is no response to the written offer, the city will be able to move forward with the sale directly to the only adjacent property owner, which is Pacific Outfitters. Oh, I am. Sorry. CEQA exemption. The decision to vacate a street right-of-way and declare the property surplus are projects for the purposes of the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA. As discussed in the staff report, the City of Eureka, as lead agency, has determined the proposed projects are categorically exempt from the provisions in accordance with Section 155305, minor land alterations in land use limitations, Class 5, and Section 15312, Class 12, surplus government property sales of the CEQA guidelines. Here's a recommendation, and when you're ready, I have the motions available. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for staff?
I think you may have mentioned this in your report, but I didn't catch it totally. So was it determined that based on the constraints of the site, easements and stuff, that there was no other appropriate buyer apart from Pacific Outfitters? Will this still have to go through the surplus process where housing developers could bid on it?
It doesn't, because it's the property is landlocked by Pacific Outfitters. As I showed in the slide in the beginning, they purchased one of the properties directly from Caltrans, and then the other property they have owned, which has their store on it.
It has to be, because it's in the coastal zone, it does have to be put up for parks, though.
Okay, thanks.
Resource agencies.
Yeah, that's a good segue to my one question on this, and thank you for staying late to give us this report, Lisa Savage. My question is has this presentation, or is this going to go by Open Space, Parks and Recreation Commission for the City of Eureka as well? I know when I was 10 years on that commission, and there was talk about putting signage there about Cooper's Gulch, because we have precious little along the 101 corridor. We have precious few signs talking about parks and where they are, and there's few that are close enough to either fourth or fifth to warrant a sign. And I know that there was some interest at some point on that. So
are you talking specifically about the small triangular piece?
yeah, at the corner where it would be appropriate for a sign to let drivers know that there's a park with.
There's two pieces. There's the piece that they use right now for parking, which is just blacktop. And then there's a tiny corner strip alongside 5th Street and their building.
Yeah.
The bigger portion where in the past we had talked about putting signs, or potentially I think there was discussion about maybe some kind of commemorative military plaque.
Mm-hmm.
That portion is now owned by Pacific Outfitters.
I see.
So if you're, and she has the picture up now. So if you're talking about the small triangular square, which you can see now in the picture.
On the right side?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I was speaking about the part on the left, right near the corner. The grass on the left near the corner. Is that also for sale or for vacation? Did I misunderstand that?
No, that's the portion that Pacific Outfitters purchased directly from Caltrans.
Okay, so not the area in red, but the green area along Myrtle Avenue.
Can you flip back to the original diagram?
Yeah, but on this slide, the red are the parts that are being vacated. And then the green area is owned by, that's not circled in red, is owned by Pacific Outfitters.
Oh, okay,
Correct.
I'm clear now. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Yeah, I don't see a compelling reason to take this to OSPR committee then. Yeah.
I just have a quick curiosity question. Why does Pacific Outfitters want to buy this? Do you know?
At this time, they use it for ingress, egress, and also additional parking. And at the time when in 2021, Pacific Outfitters put quite a bit of money into it. When the realignment happened, it was just left as a gravel area. And so they smoothed it, paved it, and started using it for their own. And so they would like to be able to keep it in perpetuity to support their business.
Okay. Thank you.
One thing that I have done since I had kids that grew up here, we did car washes there. And the city would give us a permit to do car washes because it belonged to the city. And the way the stormwater goes is into the grassy area. So it was also had biofiltration of car wash materials as well. And do you know if, is that going to take that public benefit out? I mean, do you know if Pacific Outfitters are going to work with community groups, the high school and Zane and so on, to continue with car washing and cheerleaders do car washes there? It's been a big car wash location.
We could discuss that with them. I know they're very proactive in the community. They do pack out and all kinds of other things for the community. So that's definitely a possibility.
Okay.
Okay. But just to be clear, once it's done, they would have no, they wouldn't have to do it, but we could suggest it ahead of time.
Thank you. All right, I'll open it to public comment.
Nobody's on Zoom.
Thank you. It doesn't appear anyone's here either. So I'll close public comment and bring it back to the commissioners to make a motion.
I'll make a motion. Okay. Can I just say so moved? There's two different parts to the motion. Is that okay?
There's two motions, I believe.
Okay. And do I make them one at a time or all together?
Yes, let's make them one at a time and vote on them.
I move the Planning Commission adopt a resolution finding the summary street vacation of Fifth and Myrtle rights of way conform with the general plan and recommending the City Council approve with conditions the application to vacate. And someone else has to do this, or I continue?
I think we just stop with the first motion and vote on it and then go to the second one.
I'll second the first part of that motion then.
How about just a verbal vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Yes.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Okay, I'm on a roll. I move the Planning Commission adopt a resolution finding the surplus of the Fifth and Myrtle rights of way is exempt from CEQA, and the location, purpose, and extent of the surplus is in conformance with the general plan, and direct staff to report the Commission's determination and any comments to the City Council.
We'll second that motion.
And what I don't want to make it part of the motion, but I would ask Senior Planner Savage that you do, when you report this determination to City Council, that you also say that you'll ask the new landowners, whoever they end up being, to be open to car washes and other community events there.
And I call them tomorrow to let them know that this passed. I will pass that on to them.
Great, thanks.
How about just a verbal vote again? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. Motion passes. Thank you. How's everybody doing? We have a waterfront Eureka plan update next, as long as there's no old business or new business. Okay, great.
And this is really short. If you want a flyer, just to help remind you that it's up on the website, the admin draft, it is missing the CEQA streamlining plan, which is still in process, but like the bulk of the plan is up on the website. So I have this little handout if you want it to help remind you to review it. And in July, I will actually come with a PowerPoint presentation as an update. So,
And I wanted to add the LCP land use plan is also on the website right now.
That was everything? That was awesome.
Wow. You really made up some time there. All right. Unless there's other reports and communications, I will call adjournment.